Good morning, everyone. The, our next topic is in our fourth unit. We were looking out servlets. So here we go. Today we will be working with servlet config and context objects. When we are working with servlet config and servlet config objects, it is to share data between the servlets or for configuring the servlets and sharing data between the servlets within a web application. This will be providing you to access initialization parameters, application wide resources. Like if you are making use of any JSPs, any servlets, multiple servlets, then there might be a need to share the data between the servlet and the JSP and all. So we can even uh, uh, see to access these initialization parameters, application wide resources, and communicate with other servlets, we require these two objects. Coming to servlet config object is a it is created by servlet container. For each and every servlet config object is created. It provides the configuration information that is related to that particular servlet only. The initialization parameters, it consists of the initialization parameters which will be defined in the web.xml file. Okay, so it allows servlets to read their parameters, initialization parameters, use these parameters when these parameters are specific to particular servlet. Okay, each servlet has its own servlet config object, and methods in this servlet config object is we are using this servlet config object. We can access get servlet name, which will be returning the name of the servlet. Get init parameter string name, it returns the value of the initialization parameters with the specified name. And get init parameter names returns the enumeration of all the initialization parameter names. Get servlet context, it refers to the servlet context object. Okay, it gives a reference to the servlet config object. And here is an example which helps you to know how to access init parameters. See, define initialization parameters. First is we are going to define initialization parameters in web.xml. So here web.xml, how we have defined in the servlet, we are giving servlet name, servlet class, init parameters like what are the parameter names, configuration parameters, and parameter value. Okay, in web.xml we have given all the initialization parameters. How are we going to retrieve parameters using servlet code is, see, importing all the necessary packages. Then public class, this is my servlet name. Okay, my servlet is my servlet name. My servlet extends http servlet. Okay, yeah, again, as we have seen how we are going to work with the servlets life cycle and all, in the same way we are going to do like private string config value. Here I have taken one string value, config value, and I'm trying to override initialization. Okay, initialize the servlet. So public void init method here is overridden. So servlet config object is been created and throws servlet exception super init config. Okay, and here we are trying to retrieve the initialization parameters using this. Okay, get init parameter, we are trying to get the config parameters. In this way we are trying to initialize the parameters. Now if you see protected, we are overriding the do get method, which will be sending the request and http servlet request and http servlet response, which throws a servlet exception and io exception, and response will be printed on the using print writer. Okay, so here in the html, uh, yeah, this will be printed. Okay, so in this way we can access the servlet config. Next is servlet context object. this object will be shared by all the servlets in a web application. It provides information about the web application and allows servlets to interact with with their environment, that is accessing web application wide parameters, resources, or communication between the servlets will be happen using the servlet conflict context object. Okay, it will be used for application wide configuration. Unlike config, which is specific to one servlet, this servlet context is used to share the information through widely throughout the application. Okay, you can store and retrieve global attributes that can be shared by all the servlets in the application. It allows servlets to share information between each other, and the methods involved here is get init parameter, get init parameter names, get attribute, get set attribute. If you see here, get init parameter, it returns the value of the application wide initialization parameter. Okay, and get init parameter names, enumeration of all initialization parameters, and get attribute is previously whatever you have set in the context that will be given. Set attribute is here it sets the attribute in the context which can be accessed by other servlets. And get resource as stream, it is used to access resources like files, images. Okay, those are there in this webinf directory. And get real path is it returns the real file system path for the given virtual path. Okay, here is one more example you can go through in the pdf. Okay, see parameters, all application wide parameters have been given here, global parameters if you see. Okay, context parameters, that's why we have mentioned it in xml file. We have mentioned it under context parameters. So these parameters are for throughout the web application wide parameters. Here how to access servlet context in a servlet. See, after importing necessary packages, then we are making use of the same thing. It extends http servlet, and do get is overridden. Okay, so here we are making use of servlet context object and trying to get the servlet context. Okay, next retrieve application wide init parameter, that is global parameters, initialization parameters, global value I am getting it by get init parameter. Okay, and to share the data with other servlets, we are giving it a set attribute, share data, whatever data you want to share, um, that we have to set the attributes. Okay, get the shared attribute, like how are you going to retrieve what is being shared. Okay, shared data I am storing here in, and those all will be printed in the out.println, using out.println. And accessing the shared attribute in another servlet is how are we going to access. Here we have, in the previous we have shared the data and we have seen what data we have shared. Okay, now we are in this program, we are going to see what shared attribute, whatever we have shared. No, how are we going to access it using another servlet. Okay, see, my new servlet name is another servlet, or the second servlet you can put. Okay, it extends the same again, do it, do get. Okay, do get, and here I am trying to get the servlet context object. Okay, string shared data, what is that shared data I am trying to access. Okay, see, in this servlet also I am making use of the shared data. So in this way we can access the shared data. In this example, if you see, servlet context is used to access application wide initialization parameters. It shares the data between servlets using set attribute and get attribute methods. Okay, servlet config is for initialization parameters, that is specific for the servlet, while servlet context is a global parameters. Okay, which provides application wide configuration and allows servlets to share the data. Okay, while both the objects are very important, those are vital tools in servlet programming, which will be allowing for flexible configuration and interaction with the web applications. The next topic is implementing servlet collaboration and exploring the session tracking mechanism. Implementing servlet collaboration involves, like, when you are it is the process when you are allowing multiple servlets to work together to fulfill the request in a web application. This collaboration could be achieved through various methods, like enabling servlets to share information and manage complex workflows. Here is a here is common techniques that we are going to do use it for servlet collaboration. First is using request dispatching. Servlets can collaborate by forwarding the request to other servlets or resources using the request dispatcher interface. Okay, this is often used when the servlet needs to pass control to another servlet or JSP page after processing some data. Okay, here are the two methods which we will be using, that is forward servlet. The parameters are servlet request object, servlet response object, which forwards the request and response objects to another resource like another JSP page or a servlet. Okay, include is one more method which also carries this request and response parameters, which includes the content of another resource in the and the response. Here is how we are going to forward a request. See, the first servlet extends do get method we are writing and throws a servlet exception, I go exception, setting an attribute. Okay, setting an attribute, we are setting the attribute and forwarding um, this to the second servlet. So request dispatcher object, where request dot get request dispatcher to to whichever servlet you want to share it, that servlet we are going to write it. Okay, dispatcher dot forward request and response, whatever we are sending, that will be sent to the second servlet. Okay, and the second servlet extends a HTTP request, again do get. Here we are trying to access that attributes. Okay, and println whatever we are getting. Okay, using session management, servlets can collaborate using session objects also, like user specific data. You can share across multiple requests. Okay, this is used for tracking user sessions, like and maintaining state in a web application. Okay, so here how are we going to store and retrieve data in a session? We can see here, if you see HTTP session object request dot get session. Okay, and we are trying to store the user data in the session. Okay, so we are maintaining that state in a user session, we are getting and maintaining the state of it. So if you see what I am doing, session dot set attribute user john doe, we are storing this data in the session and redirecting it to the second servlet. So send redirected to the second servlet, and second servlet here again it is trying to get the session and it is trying to get that attribute, that is retrieving the user. We are maintaining the state here. Okay, okay, this way we can communicate between the two servlets. And using context attributes, servlets can also share data using context attributes also, which are accessible by all servlets within the same application. This is useful for sharing global data, as we know. Okay, how are we going to share the data? Using servlet context. If you see, yeah, it throws we do get, we have overridden for servlet. Okay, and we are trying to get the servlet context object and the setting the attribute as app name my web application, setting web application wide attribute, and it is forwarded to the second servlet using request dispatcher or interface. Okay, request dispatcher to the second servlet. Well, the request and response are being shared to second servlet. Here again we are trying to retrieve the application wide attribute in the second servlet. If you see in the second servlet, using servlet context object, we are trying to get the context objects. Okay, app name, get attribute, what is the app name that they have given. Okay, those are retrieved. So in this way, first servlet sets an application wide attribute in the servlet context, which second servlet retrieves and uses in its response. Okay, so in this way our servlet context and the servlet configs objects are place much significance in servlets. Okay, thank you all, keep learning.